This podcast is produced by the Harwood Productions Podcast Network. To learn more about the network and to find more of our shows, visit us online at www.harwoodpodcast.com.
Hi, I'm Helene Woods, and this is Let's Quilt, episode number 17. Before we start the program today, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about an email that we got from Joan in Michigan, and she was saying that she could only find the Thermalon in a fusible piece of fabric. In that case, I suggest if it's only fused on one side, to use the back side down and use the plain side up to put your focus fabric on. If it's fused on both sides, then I would just go ahead and take my focus fabric, lay it down, and then just baste around it. Because once we sew on the first 4 strips, it's not important. Once they're sewn on, then you're ready to go. Thanks again, Joan, for your email. And if any of you other people have a question, just email us and we'll get an answer right back to you. The first thing we're going to have to do now is to sew our 4 2.5 by 6.5 inch focus fabrics on. To do this, we're going to take them and we're going to lay them across where this diagonal focus fabric is sitting. We'll just lay this on there like that. Now this is, again, is not going to be even, but that's not important. You can just put that on there. And then we'll get all 4 of them on and then we'll sew them together. Before we start sewing, I wanted to show you that I have taken my walking foot off the machine. And I don't think it's really necessary when we're doing this part of our sewing, and I can get a more accurate edge on my fabric. Now the first thing we're going to do, we're going to start sewing 1/4 inch seams, and we're going to sew right on this edge here, on all 4 of them. So I'll start that. Now I've taken my sewing machine and I have sewn all these 4 corners on. And now we're going to have to trim these little ends off here. So I'm going to take some scissors and I'm going to trim these off. All right, I've taken and I've cut off all these ends here. So now it's nice and free for us to take and turn this over, and we'll press those. When you're pressing, be sure that you take your fingers and lay that out flat first so that you have a nice edge there on your seam. And then just press your iron on top of it. There. We're going to start now with our next layer. We're going to use our 12.5 inch strips, and we're going to lay them right on this edge of the previous accent fabric, and we're just going to lay that right there and pin it. I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom side, there again, right along that line. Not worrying about whether it's even on the ends, because it won't be. It's not important. Now we come to our shorter pieces, which is the 8.5 or 8 inch. And we're going to lay those right along this last line here. Line it up and pin it. And we're going to do it with this strip too, over on this side. Just line it up right along with that previous piece of fabric and pin those. And once we get these all pinned, then we can sew, and I'll show you how to do that. When we get into sewing these strips here, I wanted to give you a little trick. When you're sewing, try not to go past the underneath fabric, because if we sew in too far and when we have to cut this off, then we have to release stitches. So I suggest when you start sewing, start in your 1/4 inch and then right there on the edge of the fabric that's underneath, and just sew right along that line. Make it easier when you're trimming. We have the long pieces and the short pieces all sewn on. Now we've got these little end pieces that we're going to trim off. So I'm just going to take this and trim them off. There. I've trimmed all your edges off, and here again we're going to iron and press, and I want to make sure that you take your fingers and stretch that out so you have a nice clean seam, and then you just bring your iron and set right on top of it on each of these as we go along. The last strips we're going to place on the placemat are our 8-inch strips, and I'm going to lay this right on top, right on that line there. Place those over there. Lay them nice and flat, and then we're going to pin these. We'll have 4 of them that we put on, so each of the corners will get one. There. There we go. One more. Just line them up and pin them. Okay, we're ready, and we're going to sew on this last strip for our placemat. Once again, now we've got this all sewn on, we're going to have to trim off these little ends. So I'm going to take my scissors and cut those off. One more time, we're going to fold this piece off that we just sewn, make it nice and flat, iron it down. In our next episode, we're going to finish off our placemat, and I'll show you how we're going to quilt it. So until next time.